join us on... Now on HTV, more moral and ethical discussion with John Meredith.
Hello again. Today we're going to talk about something that perhaps more than anything else divides the generations, the use of drugs. Here with me in the studio are students from Strode College Street in Somerset. When we went to see them, they were practically unanimous in saying yes to the legalization of all drugs. It's an argument perhaps that most of my generation find hard to accept. So why do you feel so strongly about it?
I think drugs should be legalized because it would take it out of the hands of the dealers and make it safer for us to use. You know what I mean?
Any other thoughts?
Most of the violence on the streets today is drugs related, and I think to confront a problem you must bring it out into the open.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I think that not enough people are educated about it. Everyone's giving lectures to our generation only, and every parent I know just doesn't know a thing about drugs, what they do, and the dangers and what they're about. And I think that instead of just only concentrating on our generation and telling them, trying to educate them, they should educate the parents. I know there should be programs on TV about it or something like that. It's just...
Well, we're doing one today, and perhaps
yeah,
I can introduce now two people who've been listening to that and perhaps want to disagree. We'll see. Dr. Peter Taberner is Senior Lecturer in Pharmacology at the University of Bristol, who regularly lectures on drugs and drug abuse at schools in the West Country. And Canon Robin Prothero, who is Director of Education for the Diocese of Bristol. Can I just pick up on that last point first before we talk about whether or not drugs should be legalized? The point about education, the point that there clearly is a generation gap between parents on the one hand and youngsters on the other.
Oh, I think this is tremendously important, but I think that the education has to go on not just with parents, but also with young people. I mean, I have very little detailed knowledge. I look to Peter here for that kind of detailed knowledge. But there's a tremendous amount of misunderstanding and sheer ignorance out there about different types of drugs, which are addictive, which are not, which are psychologically addictive or lead to dependence, which are physiologically addictive, and so on. And I need to know it as a parent, but you need to know it as well.
Would that information, just a second, if it came to you, enable you to say whether or not you would agree with legalizing all drugs?
Well, I certainly, I would say, I've been absolutely opposed to the decriminalization of all drugs because of the effects of some drugs. I think that every drug differs from every other drug, and I need to listen to the arguments about what the effects are of particular drugs.
Peter, the problem about information to start with, do we actually know enough about drugs to take any decision?
We certainly know enough to be aware of the risks. I mean, whether people are actually educated to be aware of those risks is another matter. But a lot of the problems take a very long time to emerge. It's taken us 40 years to really recognise the danger of tobacco. And there's still some people who don't recognise that as a real danger. So I would make all head and use recreationally.
Can I come back then to you? Why do you believe drugs are used? Why do people use drugs to start with? Yes.
I feel going across the generations, looking back, opening up more, that this goes back a long way. Between across civilizations. For instance, in South America and Northern America, where drug abuse is currently hopefully repairing itself, going back into those cultures, the true sacred nature of the plant has been used properly by tribes where there might be a shaman or a medicine man that basically would be the only one that would take the drug, and he would share what he received from that communion with the rest of his tribe for the benefit. So if you would wish to say there is some kinds of rules and regulations there, but also a certain knowledge being passed on too. And I think that's been seen through the ages. And unfortunately, there has been an abuse, particularly by white man, maybe other cultures too. But it is generally an overall thing that needs to be tackled. But I do feel that it could go back to Columbus, maybe long way before then. Okay. Columbus and people, white Americans, white people, that the sacred plant, the tobacco plant, where the white man crosses those borders, the sacred plant was actually taken rather than received.
Okay.
So
I don't want to be rude and crash here, but you made a very interesting anthropological point, if not an historical one, in a context. But what about today, the society in which you live, with regard to the taking of drugs now? Why is it you believe, from your knowledge or experience, that drugs are taken today? Yes, at the front, yes.
I think they take it to escape from their humdrum lives. That's one way, the high of the drugs. And I think other people take it because it's supposedly a hard thing to do. It's something exciting. It provides a sort of stimulus. Again, it's a sort of escape again. That's really why people do it, I think.
Yes, at the back, you wanted to come in?
Some people take it just for another, just, I don't know, for a bit of excitement. Just they go out one night and they take whatever drug, they smoke some cannabis maybe, just to think differently, just to, just to improve, I mean, maybe not to live that life all the time, but just to have a bit of fun. I mean.
Does anyone draw a distinction between, you made the point about despair, alcohol frequently is used by people in despair, perhaps to overcome circumstances in which they find themselves, but does anyone distinguish between drug use in that context and the social, recreational, pleasurable use of drugs? Any other thoughts on that?
I think,
yes, down the front, yeah.
I hope if we'd found out however long ago that tobacco and alcohol were discovered, if we'd found out they were harmful then, that they would be illegal as well. Because really it's sheer hypocrisy to legalise drugs which are just as bad for you as some which are illegal. It seems pointless.
I don't think that would improve the situation, though.
I don't.
I think if alcohol was illegal as well, people would just be buying, like in Prohibition in America in the early 20th century, when alcohol was illegal, it was incredible underground. People were making huge profits. Violence was massive.
How easy is it for people like you, if you wanted to have access to drugs?
Very easy.
It's very easy. Give me some examples. I mean, how easy is it? You were nodding up.
Everything's available everywhere. That's the point of everything. You can get anything anywhere whenever.
How?
Well,
friends, or places where people sell it.
Does anybody here or has had experience of using any kinds of drugs? You know people perhaps who have?
Yes.
Yeah. What do they tell you about the consequences or the effects of using drugs?
Well, most of us know the effects of the drugs that are offered to us. I think we know by now, at our age, what drugs will have what effects on us and the dangers of most of the drugs. And we have made a choice as to whether to take them or not. So I don't think, there are a few who are naive to the effects, but most of those people who use drugs do know the effects of drugs.
Well, Peter, you've looked at clearly the consequences in terms of health of taking drugs, and you've heard, certainly from one or two, that whether or not they take drugs, they do know the consequences. Do you believe that?
I don't, I'm afraid. I think that one of the problems on the street is what you get is not necessarily what you think you're getting. Drugs are cut, and drugs are replaced with other active ingredients. And a lot of the problems, and somebody mentioned earlier on about legalisation would get rid of the dealers. It would probably get rid of the dangers of drugs which are contaminated and have got toxic substances in. So that's one argument in favour, but it still doesn't get rid of the drug itself in the sense of there's no such thing as a safe drug for a start. Every drug does have a problem. I can't think of a single drug that's used either legally or recreationally or illicitly that is not without a certain degree of risk.
But life isn't safe.
No.
I mean, if you want to try and take everything that isn't safe out of life, we'd all be sitting indoors watching TV and going to work at 9 in the morning.
Yes, of course. But I mean, there are risks and there are risks, aren't there?
Yeah.
You know, there are risks associated with mountain climbing. There are risks associated with motor racing.
I do a lot of climbing, and I spend a lot of time up a cliff.
Yeah.
And if you were to say to me, "That's not safe," or "We don't want you to do that," I'd get rather upset.
Yeah, surely.
That's a little buzz that I enjoy.
Could someone perhaps explain, from whatever background you come, why you think, for example, cannabis, which I understand is widely used, and is seen as no different from smoking a cigarette, albeit we now know what cigarettes can do, but why cannabis apparently is not harmful? Does anybody...
Alcohol is...
No, cannabis I'm asking about.
Yeah, but I'm comparing it. I think
Yeah.
the effects of cannabis, if you take cannabis regularly, and then you get someone who drinks a lot of alcohol, I mean, they're in much worse shape. I mean, alcohol scares me to death, you know, but cannabis doesn't, because I don't think, I mean, I think it would be, you know, still safe, unsafe to smoke and then drive, if you see what I mean. But I mean, alcohol is just, you know,
Peter, it's safe to have cannabis?
Yes, I think what you say is right about cannabis. As far as we know, it's not addictive, physically addicting, like alcohol is. And a certain proportion of alcohol drinkers will become addicted. It's about 10%. So we have about a million in this country, roughly, people addicted to alcohol. Cannabis doesn't do this. It does have effects, and as you rightly say, it affects your ability to drive or do skilled tasks. I personally wouldn't feel too happy if I was in a society where the bus driver, the train driver, the taxi driver could be smoking cannabis, and their ability...
But then they could be drinking whiskey every night. Yeah. Or they could be alcoholics that are drinking whiskey in the morning.
But we're talking here in this programme about drugs specifically because you believe, as I understand it, or most of you believe, that there should not be laws against the use of all drugs, including amphetamines, heroin, and so on. Is that so? I mean, who actually believes that there are no harmful effects and no reason why one shouldn't use all sorts of drugs?
No, it's not harmful.
Right, down at the front, yes, you.
It's not to do with whether or not it's actually harmful to use these drugs. It's whether having them, usually there's a huge overreaction to these things by everybody. And when you get a huge overreaction, everything gets all blown out of proportion, which is what's happened with something like cannabis, which basically, as most people know, has got, you know, little or few very, very harmful effects. That is no more than cigarette smoking or whatever. But it's been blown so out of proportion that everyone's overreacted to it, and therefore nothing is quite in proportion somehow. And it's not that hard drugs are not damaging, it's just that when they're so underground, no one really has the proper ability to see the situation straight. And I think that to bring these things a little bit more closer to the surface so that everyone's got some way of understanding them properly is probably a more sensible approach.
So this brings us back to the point, doesn't it, that we were talking about in the beginning, the importance of information and the importance of education. But I also want to pick up another point which has emerged 2 or 3 times in the course of the discussion, John, and it is the suggestion that somehow legalization of all drugs will lead to a reduction in drug-related crime. I don't believe it will, and I point you to Holland. Now, Holland has the most liberal drug regime in Western Europe, and yet the French are now complaining, the French who live on the borders of Holland, that people are coming over from Holland, committing crimes in France to get money to support their habit. You know, the drug-related crime is still there.
That's because they haven't completely legalized all hard drugs. The hard drugs are still illegal, I believe. I mean, I don't know a great deal about the situation, but the hard drugs are still illegal. If they were legalized, would they not become cheaper? And therefore maybe put under some legislation so people control the amount of drugs going out. I'm not saying legalize and let everybody bring in whatever they like and shoot up in the street and stuff, and, you know, make sure, leave importing drugs illegal, so you can still take
I don't think you're going to find it a bit cheaper. I mean, that's one myth, I think. If you legalize drugs, you'll replace the drug barons with the multinational companies. The Philip Morris Corporation, Reynolds, BAT will make a profit on these, and the government will make profit from the tax. The government will actually raise a tax. You can't tell me that if cannabis was legal...
We shouldn't allow it to be done like that.
Yeah, you think it would be a good idea if, as government now taxes alcohol and cigarettes, for example, it should raise money from taxation on drugs if they were freely available?
Yeah, because, I mean, we're stuck at the moment in an economic rut. we need more money. We're borrowing it off of other countries. If we legalised a few drugs, I don't actually agree with legalising all of them. I don't actually agree with legalising drugs full stop. But if they did legalise them, then we would be able to get more money. I mean, they're putting up tax on lots of things. Petrol. Yeah, cigarettes and alcohol.
Well, can I ask you then, if you believe that legalising some or all drugs would A, remove the criminal element and clearly remove a cost factor in terms of policing and all the consequences, how would that affect the harmful nature of what some will claim, maybe Peter would, drugs can have? For example, in the last 10 years, deaths from drugs have gone up, maybe small in numbers, but from 151 in 1982 to 345 in 1992. So irrespective of whether or not drugs are legal or not, they can kill people. What is your answer to that? What is your answer to that?
Is that such a bad thing? I mean, there's too many people in this world as it is.
I'm assuming you're making a serious point. You don't actually think it matters that people can kill themselves for the use of substances?
If they want to do it, as long as we're informed what it can do to you, if they want to still take it, it's entirely up to them.
Anybody else agree with that or disagree? Sorry, right at the front. Yes, you wanted to.
I think that if you legalise it, there's going to be more deaths because it's easier to get hold of, and then it's easier to overdose on it. And
one at a time. Yes, gentleman at the back.
I would like to say that I think if you actually legalised it, you just get things like Marlboro cannabis, which would just be really mild, and people would still go underground to get what they really want, and the dangers would be reduced no less.
It's got to be legalised properly.
Gentleman at the back.
Sorry, but like all the deaths and that have been related, not all of them, but deaths have been related through like speed and things cut with bad things. If it was legal, it could be controlled, and people wouldn't also like get killed because of all the stuff messed in with it, all the crap, basically.
What's your reaction to this?
Well, but can you imagine, I mean, there was a time when Canada, I don't know whether it still does, but they tried to organise alcohol like that. And you had actually to go to a government store, and you were given a book of tickets which allowed you to buy 1 bottle of whiskey, let's say, and a 6-pack of beer per month. I mean, the thing went crazy. People were trading the books of tickets and so on. It's bizarre to think that the government might organise the drug trade like that.
If you deprive people of things, then obviously people are just going to break out and try to get it any way they can. But I was just thinking about the whole issue of whether or not it's dangerous. I mean, you can kill yourself with paracetamol. People know how to kill themselves. People have always known how to kill themselves, and so I don't think that's a suitable argument. I think that people would know more. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not positive that yes, everything should be legalised, because that would be too blanket a statement.
Do people believe that who would want to see drugs in whatever shape or form legalised, that it should be the marketplace that delivers them, or should they be on prescription through the chemist shop and the taxpayer subsidising them, or what?
Well, depends on
which drug you're talking about. I think if it's something like cannabis, you should be able to just go into a shop, and if you're a certain age, maybe 18, you know, you can get your cannabis. And but if it's, I don't know.
That's not going to stop younger people from getting it. I mean, look at
well, it's like alcohol, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, smokers there are. There's thousands, millions of underage smokers.
Cigarettes are really difficult to control. They're not controlling cigarettes. You can get them in
but if
shops everywhere. You
but if you do what George is...
No, I'm not. It's like pubs for alcohol. It should be like pubs for alcohol. You should be able to go to a certain place to get
Peter,
it. And
you go out, just a second, you go out as part of your duties talking to schools and other places about the dangers of drug abuse. Does this distress you, the views you're hearing?
Not entirely. At least there's a debate going on that some people have obviously thought it through. I don't think we've necessarily thought through all the ramifications of legalising drugs that would come about, because at present we have laws that say you shouldn't drive if you're under the influence of drink or drugs, and drugs are there. It's recognised as a problem, and certainly if you legalise them, they become more widely available. They're widely available, but I mean, I couldn't go and get cannabis. I mean, I'd have to hunt around. I couldn't go and get it at my Tesco weekly shop.
No, I mean, you wouldn't get it in Tesco, would you? You wouldn't get it in a shop. You'd get it outside the shops.
Robin, can I just bring you in? Is it acceptable, is it morally right, that if someone wants to destroy themselves, no matter what the consequences to their family or their friends, as a result of drugs or anything else, they have a right to do so?
I don't think they do. I mean, John Stuart Mill is the libertarian par excellence, I guess, and he said that nobody should be prevented from doing anything which did not cause harm to somebody else. Now, I can't see how somebody getting addicted to drugs could not possibly cause harm to other people, if only to his friends and to his family. You know, he was the greatest advocate of liberty that we've had, and he said, okay, life is full of risks, but if you see somebody who's going to cross a very dangerous bridge over a foaming torrent, you have the right, this libertarian said this, you have the right to go and by force if necessary, to hold him back until you know that he knows the risks, that he's competent to make the decision to cross that bridge, and that he's going over of his own free will. And that makes the whole business of taking drugs pretty complex, I think.
Peter, just coming back to you, if the views that we've heard today, and I'm not quite sure how representative they are, I mean, they're obviously coming through very strongly, gain credence and perhaps are widely acceptable, do you actually foresee there will be changes in the law that some drugs may not be a criminal offence to acquire and get
well,
some drugs?
Well, is whether you legalise them on a criminal offence are quite different ideas. To decriminalise the possession of a small amount of cannabis for personal use, I can visualise that, and it seems to me not an unreasonable possibility. But to actually say this is legal, you can manufacture it and you can sell it as a commercial organisation, I don't see that at all. I think we've learnt the lesson from alcohol and tobacco. I mean, that's historic, we're stuck with them, we can't get rid of them, and just to bring another group of drugs into that market, I think would be disastrous.
Can I say something
Yeah.
in addition to that?
Just a quick one.
Yeah. I just want to say, the genie is now in the bottle. You let the genie out of the bottle, you can never get back in again. You know, prohibition, you couldn't prohibit alcohol, you couldn't prohibit tobacco. However dangerous these things are, you know, prohibition did not work. It would not work. All you can do is gradually to change people's opinions, as we have done with tobacco.
Very briefly.
I feel that you have to deal with not the cause, but the, not the effect, but the cause. And I think that goes back a long way, in the way that in, say, alcohol and tobacco, we're looking on a global scale, where there is a sort of where basically alcohol was introduced into the Native American Indian cultures and also the Aboriginal cultures, and it poisoned them.
Well, we're at the end of this discussion. Before we leave, at the beginning, most of you, I think, were in favour of legalising all drugs. What's the view now, a vote? Would all of you now legalise all drugs? Cannabis. About half and half. Well, thank you very much, all of you, from the Strode College. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Robin. Next week, a subject perhaps has been debated even longer than drugs. Is there life after death? That's what students from Red Knox School in Dursley want to talk about. See you then.